Nara watched the human named Kale. Her large, dark Zalar eyes blinked slowly. A quiet sound came from her throat. It was the Zalar way of showing polite amusement. Kale was telling a story. He sat cross-legged on the floor of the shared recreation room aboard Deep Space Station Alara. Other Zalar listened too. Their tall, thin bodies were still. They found human stories strange. Kale spoke with energy. His hands moved as he talked. His voice went up and down. He spoke of creatures made of fire that lived in mountains. He called them dragons. He described brave humans who fought them, not with advanced weapons, but with simple swords and clever tricks. Sometimes, even with song. Nora tilted her head. Her translator implant turned Kale's words into Zalar concepts. Logic, analysis, risk assessment. These were Zalar's strengths. Kale's story lacked these. It spoke of courage born from fear, of hope against impossible odds, of anger giving strength. These were human things, messy, unpredictable, illogical, fascinating. Kale, Nora said. Her voice was smooth and calm, always calm. Your people possess a vivid imagination to create such powerful narratives from primitive fears. Kale grinned. It was a wide, toothy expression. Zalar mouths were small slits. They did not grin. They felt real to the people back then. Nora, maybe they were real, in a way. Another Zalar chuckled. A dry, rustling sound. Impossible. Biological entities of that description defy known physics. Your legends are metaphors, symbolic representations of natural disasters or internal struggles. Cal shrugged. Maybe. But they taught us things. How to face things that scare us. How to keep going when everything seems lost. He looked around at the Zyrus. Their faces were hard to read, but he saw skepticism in their stiff postures. Humans were new to the galactic community. Eager, emotional, full of strange old stories. The Zyrus were ancient, wise, calm. They relied on data, on technology, on careful planning. They saw humans as interesting children, full of potential, but needing much guidance. Their history was short. Their technology borrowed. Their emotions were a weakness. Their legends, amusing nonsense. Little fictions for a young race. Station Alara was a joint project, a symbol of cooperation. Zyra technology formed the structure. Human adaptability filled the spaces within. It orbited a quiet star, in a mostly empty sector of space, a place for research, for peaceful observation. Nothing ever happened here. That was the point. Until something did. It started subtly. Sensor ghosts. Strange energy readings at the edge of detection. The Zylar science teams were meticulous. They ran diagnostics. They checked equipment. They recalibrated sensors. The readings persisted. Faint, erratic, unidentifiable. Nara led the primary science team. She spent cycles analyzing the data. The energy signature matched nothing known. It was faint, yet it seemed to warp space-time locally in ways that required immense power. But the power source was undetectable. It defied Zylar physics. Inconclusive, she reported to the station commander, a stern Zylar named Rorik. The phenomenon is intermittent. Possibly a natural anomaly we haven't catalogued. Rorik nodded slowly. His large eyes stared at the star charts. Maintain vigilance, Nara. Log all occurrences. Report any escalation. Cal worked in hydroponics, growing food for the station. He heard whispers, talk of strange sensor readings, of scientists looking worried. He didn't think much of it. Space was vast, full of mysteries. That's why they were out here. He tended his plants, listened to old Earth music. Sometimes he hummed old folk songs. Songs his grandmother taught him. Songs about heroes and monsters. A few days later, the whispers grew louder, more urgent. A deep space probe sent to investigate the anomaly went silent. Not just silent, it vanished. One moment, it was transmitting data. The next, nothing. Not even wreckage. Just empty space. Fear, a cold and unfamiliar sensation for many Zylar, began to ripple through the station. Nara's team worked harder, their calm demeanor strained. They rerouted more power to sensors. They launched more probes. Smaller, faster, expendable. Kyle felt the change. The air in the corridor seemed colder. The Zalara spoke less. Their usual calm voices were clipped. tense. He saw a Zolar technician jump when a door hissed open nearby. That was unusual. Zolar prided themselves on emotional control. Then the first station sensor relay went dark. It was positioned far out, a lonely speck in the void. It simply stopped transmitting. No warning, no distress signal, just silence. Nara's face was tight when she passed Kyle in the corridor. He was delivering fresh vegetables to the mess hall. "Nara, is everything okay?" he asked. She stopped, her eyes focused on him. Usually her gaze was analytical. Now, something else flickered there. Something Kale recognized. Worry. Deep worry. "We are investigating anomalous readings, Kyle," she said. Her voice was still smooth, but lacked its usual warmth. "Maintain your duties. Follow standard procedures." She walked away quickly, her tall frame rigid. That night, Kyle couldn't sleep. The silence of the station felt wrong, heavy. He lay in his small bunk, staring at the metal ceiling. He thought about the old stories. Stories of things lurking in the dark. Things that came silently. Things that fed on fear. He shook his head. Ridiculous. These were Zolara scientists. Masters of logic. They would figure it out. It was probably just a weird space thing. A comet made of dark matter. A magnetic field fluctuation. Something logical. Then the station lights flickered. Cal sat up. Emergency lights glowed dimly. Red. Alarms began to chime. Softly at first. Then louder. More insistent. A cold dread washed over Cal. He pulled on his jumpsuit. His hands trembled slightly. He opened his cabin door. The corridor was bathed in red, emergency light. Zolar and a few other humans were emerging from their rooms. Faces pale, confused. A voice came over the station intercom. It was Commander Rorik. His voice was strained. The usual calm control was gone. Replaced by urgency. Alert. Unknown phenomenon detected approaching Station Alara. All personnel to designated safe zones. Repeat. All personnel to safe zones. This is not a drill. KL's heart pounded. Unknown phenomenon. That didn't sound good. He joined the stream of people moving down the corridor towards the central core. The designated safe zone. It had the thickest hull, the most life support redundancy. He saw Nara directing Zolara technicians. Her voice was sharp, precise. But her eyes darted around, searching the shadows. Suddenly a section of the corridor ahead went dark. Not just dark like a light burning out, utter blackness. As if the void itself had seeped inside. A cold deeper than space emanated from it. People stopped. A ripple of fear went through the crowd. A Zylar near the front raised a scanner, pointed it at the darkness. "No energy readings," the Zylar reported, voice trembling. "No mass, no radiation. It's nothing. But it's expanding." The darkness flowed towards them, like ink spilled in water. Silent. Cold. A low hum started. Not a sound Kale heard with his ears, but one he felt in his bones. A hum of utter despair. People backed away. Panic started to build. Someone screamed. "Seal the corridor," Nara commanded. Her voice cut through the rising noise. Technicians scrambled to a control panel. A heavy emergency door began to slide shut, cutting off the encroaching darkness. But it was too slow. The blackness touched the edge of the closing door. Metal groaned, screeched, like it was being torn apart by immense, silent force. The door buckled inward. Then it dissolved. Just ceased to exist. Leaving an empty frame. The darkness flowed through. Faster now. Kale felt an icy grip clutch his heart. Raw terror, unlike anything he had ever known. He saw Zolara frozen in place. Their logical minds struggling to process what they were seeing. It made no sense. It followed no known rules. A human woman near him sobbed. Her fear was a tangible thing, and the darkness seemed to surge towards her. Drawn to the sound, drawn to the emotion, Kale remembered a story, a very old one, about creatures called wraiths, shadow beings that fed on life force, on fear, on despair. They were repelled by light, by strong will, by defiance. It was a stupid legend, primitive superstition. But seeing the darkness flow towards the crying woman, Kale acted without thinking. He grabbed a portable light stick from an emergency kit on the wall, ignited it. A bright white glow pushed back the red emergency lighting. "Hey!" Kale shouted. His voice cracked, but he projected it as loud as he could. He stepped forward, towards the darkness, holding the light stick high, like a sword. "Get back." The darkness paused. It seemed to recoil slightly from the intense light, but mostly, it seemed confused by his shout, by the raw defiance in his voice. It hesitated. The humming lessened for a moment. In that moment, Nara found her voice again. "Move! Now!" she yelled. People scrambled back, towards the safe zone entrance further down the corridor. Kale kept the light stick pointed at the darkness. He backed away slowly. His legs felt like lead. His mind screamed at him to run, but he remembered the stories. Stand your ground, show no fear. Even when you're terrified. The darkness flowed again, slower this time, tentative, as if unsure about the bright light and the defiant human. They reached the safe zone, a large reinforced chamber in the station's core. People poured inside. Cal stumbled in last. Nara slammed the controls. A massive, layered door thudded shut. Locking mechanism engaged with heavy clicks. Cal leaned against the cold metal wall. Panting, his light stick flickered. He hadn't realized he was gripping it so hard. Nara approached him. Her face was a mask of controlled tension. "Report, Cal. What did you observe?" Cal looked at her. Her logical mind was already trying to analyze, to categorize. It stopped. When I shone the light," he stammered. "And when I yelled, it seemed to hesitate." Nara frowned. "Light intensity output of that device is minimal. Standard spectrum. It should have no effect on any known energy field or entity. Your vocalization." She paused. Perhaps the sound frequency interfered momentarily. "It felt like it reacted to me," Coel said quietly. "To the light, yes, but also to me not backing down right away." Nara stared at him, her expression unreadable. "Subjective interpretation, Coel. We need data." She turned to the Zoller technicians monitoring the internal sensors. "Status? The entity breached the corridor," a technician reported. Voice hushed. "It is currently flowing towards this location, slowly. External sensors show multiple entities now surrounding the station. Identical signatures, or lack thereof. Multiple entities." Coel's blood ran cold. Shadows, that's what they felt like. Void shadows. Things from the dark spaces between stars. Things legends warned about. Commander Rorik's voice came over the safe zone speakers, grim, resigned. "External communication arrays are offline. Main power is fluctuating. Hull integrity is compromised in multiple sectors. The entities are phasing through solid matter." Phasing through matter. Cole remembered stories of ghosts, of beings that existed outside physical laws. Nara listened. Her hands clenched at her sides. Her logical world was crumbling. The station's defenses, the pinnacle of Zoller technology, were useless. Shields didn't stop them. Weapons couldn't target them. Bulkheads couldn't contain them. They were impossible. Illogical, terrifying. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt distorted in the sealed room. The low hum of despair vibrated through the deck plates, stronger now. Outside the massive door, Kale could sense the shadows gathering. He saw humans huddled together, some praying quietly, others crying softly. The Zoller stood rigid, trying to maintain composure, but their large eyes showed bewilderment and fear. Nara directed her team. They tried modulating shield harmonics, emitting broad-spectrum energy pulses, generating intense magnetic fields. Nothing worked. The shadows outside didn't react. They simply continued their slow, inexorable approach. Their presence radiated cold and hopelessness. Kel watched Nara, saw the frustration mounting behind her calm mask. She ran simulation after simulation, trying to find a logical weakness, a scientific counter. But the shadows defied logic. They were something else entirely. Kel closed his eyes. He thought about his grandmother, her warm kitchen, the smell of baking bread, her voice telling stories. Stories of banshees, whose cries foretold death, of shadow creatures, scared away by laughter and song, of protective symbols drawn on doors. Primitive nonsense, utterly illogical. But what if the Zylar's logic was the problem? What if these things didn't operate on physics as they knew it? What if they operated on belief, on emotion? He opened his eyes. He looked at the fear on the faces around him. The despair. The Xylar tried to suppress it, to analyze it away. The humans felt it fully, and the shadows seemed drawn to it, growing stronger. What was the opposite of fear? Hope, courage, defiance, love, community. Things from the old stories. Things humans excelled at, even when it made no sense. He had to try. He walked over to Nara. She was staring at a screen showing incomprehensible energy patterns outside the door. Nara, Kale said. She didn't look up. Not now. Kale, I am analyzing. Your analysis isn't working. Kale interrupted, gently, but firmly. Nara finally looked at him. Annoyance flickered in her eyes. We are dealing with an unknown phenomenon. I know, Kale said. Maybe it's not a phenomenon your science understands. Maybe it's something older. Nora tilted her head. Explain. My people have stories, Kale began, his voice low, earnest. Legends, myths, about things like this. Things made of shadow, things that feed on fear. Nora's expression tightened. Kale, listen, this is not the time for folklore. Maybe it is, Kale insisted, his voice rising slightly, drawing glances from others in the room. Maybe those stories weren't just metaphors. Maybe they were warnings, instructions, passed down through generations, about how to fight things that logic can't touch. He took a deep breath. The stories say these things fear light, not just any light, but light that represents hope. They fear strong will, defiance. They fear positive emotions, community, joy, things that counter the despair they spread. Nara stared at him. Then she turned back to her screen. Emotional states cannot influence subspace entities. Kale, there is no scientific basis. A loud bang echoed from the safe zone door. Metal groaned. Dust sifted from the ceiling. Everyone froze. Another bang. Harder this time. The massive door shuddered. Whatever was outside was now trying to get in. Panic spiked. A human screamed again. Several Zolar flinched visibly. The humming intensified. A wave of dizziness and nausea washed over Kale. Despair clawed at his mind, telling him it was hopeless. They were doomed. Nara, please, Kale pleaded. Desperation sharpened his voice. What have we got to lose? Your way isn't working. Let us try mine. Nara looked at the trembling door. Then at the terrified faces around her. Her Zolar logic warred with the undeniable reality of their failure. The impossible was happening. Maybe the impossible was the only answer left. She looked back at Kale. His eyes pleaded with her. Full of fear, yes, but also a spark of desperate hope. A very human spark. She made a decision. A leap away from centuries of Zolar methodology. What do you propose? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Hope surged in Kale. We need light. Bright light. Focused. Maybe symbols. He remembered symbols of protection from old books. Stars, spirals, circles. Can you project patterns? With the internal lights? Nara nodded slowly. The emergency lighting system is basic, but programmable to a degree. Simple geometric shapes are possible. Okay. Project a star, Kyle said. A simple 5-pointed star. Onto the door. Make it as bright as possible. Nara hesitated for a second, then turned to a technician. Override emergency lighting protocols. Concentrate power to emitters facing the main door. Project designation star. Maximum intensity. The technician looked shocked, but nodded and worked the controls. The dim red lights in the room faded slightly. Then, a brilliant white star blazed into existence on the inner surface of the besieged door. It pulsed with light. Outside, the banging stopped. The heavy, despairing hum lessened slightly. People stared, mouths open. Kale felt a flicker of relief. It was working. Maybe. Now what? Nara asked, her voice tight. The stories. Kale's mind raced. Light helped. Defiance helped. What else? Sound. Music. Singing. A Xylar scientist nearby scoffed. Primitive auditory vibrations. How could that possibly? It's not just sound, Kale said, cutting him off. It's the intent behind it. The emotion. We need something hopeful, something defiant, something everyone can join in. He thought of the songs his grandmother sang. Simple tunes, easy to learn, full of resilience. He picked one, an old sea shanty, about sailors facing a storm, scared but singing together to keep their spirits up. "I know a song," Cal said. He looked around at the humans, their faces still pale with fear. But now, a glimmer of curiosity, of willingness to try anything. "It's simple. I'll teach you." He started singing. His voice was unsteady at first, but he sang it loud, projecting confidence he didn't feel. "Through the wind and pouring rain, heave haul, lads, and sing again. Though the sea wants us below, heave haul, lads, the way we'll go." A few humans looked at each other. Then, one by one, they joined in. A young woman first, then an older man. Soon, half a dozen human voices filled the safe zone. Their singing was ragged, imperfect, off-key, but it was heartfelt. It was defiant. It pushed back against the suffocating despair. Kira looked at Nara. She watched the humans sing. Her expression was one of utter bafflement. This was chaos, illogical, meaningless noise, yet she looked at her sensor readings from outside the door. The energy patterns of the shadows, they were fluctuating wildly, recoiling, as if in pain or confusion. The heavy hum of despair was being drowned out by the rough, hopeful sound of the human song. The Zaire technicians stared at their screens, eyes wide, murmuring in disbelief. The data made no sense. Sound waves shouldn't affect these entities. Emotional states shouldn't register on their instruments. Yet, they were. "More," Cale urged the singers. "Louder, sing like you mean it." The singing swelled. More humans joined in. Their fear wasn't gone, but now it mixed with something else. Stubbornness. A refusal to give in. They sang the simple song over and over, their voices growing stronger, more confident. Cale grinned. A real, wide grin. He caught Nara's eye. He saw something new in her expression. Awe, maybe even the beginnings of belief. The brilliant star projected on the door pulsed brighter, as if resonating with the song. The Xylar technicians, acting on Nara's silent command, began subtly adjusting the light frequency, matching its pulse to the rhythm of the human singing. Light and sound, hope and defiance, working together. Outside the door, the shadows writhed. The oppressive cold lessened. The suffocating despair lifted slightly. Cal could feel it. The palpable sense of menace was receding, being pushed back by the combined force of human voices and symbolic light. It wasn't a weapon in the way the Xylar understood weapons. It wasn't energy blasts or force fields. It was something else, something born from the strange, messy, emotional core of humanity. Something the logical Xylar had dismissed as myth, as primitive nonsense. The song continued for what felt like a long time. Nobody knew how long exactly. They just kept singing, pouring their fear, their hope, their stubborn refusal to die into the simple melody. Cale's throat was raw. His voice was hoarse, but he kept going, leading the chorus. Beside him, Nara watched her instruments. The shadow signatures were weakening, retreating from the immediate vicinity of the door, fading back into the station corridors. She looked at the singing humans, their faces flushed, eyes bright. Then she looked at Cale. He met her gaze, still singing, still defiant. Finally, the external sensors showed the shadow signatures withdrawing completely from the station, fading back into the void from whence they came. As quickly and silently as they had arrived, a Xylar technician announced it, his voice filled with disbelief. "They're gone. All signatures have vanished." Silence fell in the safe zone. The singing stopped, replaced by ragged breathing, coughing. Then a tentative cheer went up from the humans, followed by relieved sobbing, exhausted laughter. They had faced the impossible, the illogical, and they had survived, not through superior technology, but through a song, a light, a shared act of defiance rooted in ancient stories. Koa leaned heavily against the wall, his legs finally giving out. He slid down into a sitting position, exhausted but exhilarated. He had been terrified, absolutely terrified, but the stories had been right. The Xylar gathered around Nara, speaking in low, confused tones. Their worldview had been shaken, their understanding of the universe challenged. They looked at the humans with new eyes, not as primitive newcomers, but as something different, something unexpectedly strong. Nara approached Kolai. She stood over him, her tall figure silhouetted against the pulsing light of the star symbol, which still shone brightly on the door. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes held a profound confusion and a reluctant respect. She knelt down beside him, a gesture of lowering herself that was significant for a Zolaire. She studied his face, his sweat-streaked skin, his tired eyes, his ragged breathing. "Explain," she said softly, her voice barely audible above the relieved chatter in the room. "Your science cannot account for this. Our logic dictates it was impossible. The entities, they reacted to non-physical stimuli, to emotion, to symbolic representation." Kale looked up at her. He managed a weak smile. He thought about the dragons, the wraiths, the banshees, the shadow creatures that haunted human nightmares and legends for millennia. The things the Zolaire had politely laughed at just days ago. The things that had almost destroyed them all. The things that had turned out to be terrifyingly real. He took a slow, shuddering breath. His voice was a hoarse whisper, barely more than air. But in the sudden quiet focus Nara gave him, it carried immense weight. "They're real."